Hey, this is Kian from St. Kitts, just answering the questions for the ag interview. Here we go.
All right, Kian, how has farming in St. Kitts changed in your lifetime?
Okay, so I've been in St. Kitts for about 3 years, which is not a long time. But what I've seen in my time here is that some of the organizations around agriculture have gotten a little bit more organized. For example, the Department of Agriculture has started to do more farmer training programs, and they've also started to store more seeds, more livestock feed, and just more resources in general for local farmers on the island. They've also been more in communication with them to ask questions. So when a farmer might need something a couple months in advance, the Department of Agriculture can plan ahead to try to help get those farmers the resources that they need. Another thing I've noticed is that there's been a little bit more talent coming down, especially in the last year or two. People with money and resources have kind of taken farming on as passion projects in a sense. So they've started their own farms where they've put their own resources in. They've gone out and found the talent to work on the farms, and they've actually developed some really good sustainable projects here on island.
Are the issues facing the farmers the same or different?
I think that they're similar, I should say. So one big one is monkeys and pigs are really big pests here. So monkeys, for example, can ravage fields like tomatoes, cucumbers. What they'll do is they'll jump over fences, and there's really been no fix for that, but there's been a lot more dialogue about trying to solve that issue. With pigs, if they get under a fence, they'll get into a field and root up a lot of crops. So farmers have gotten smarter at keeping pigs at bay, but they're still struggling with the monkeys. So I would say in that way, they're still very similar. I haven't really seen that farmers face new issues per se than I've seen when I got here. So that's my take. Yeah.
Does the market look any different?
The market is definitely in a state of change for a couple reasons. The first is that there's a lot more cruise ships coming to island. So these are people it's a different demand and more demand coming to the island. So people wanting, even if they're only here for a day, they still want to have a great meal. They seek great produce or vegetables that are involved in those meals. So that's driven more, people are seeking more high quality fruits and vegetables, which is one big change. Another one is that there's a lot more hotels and resorts that are opening, and these hotels love to buy from local farmers, and they're really active in seeking them out and trying to form partnerships or agreements with them so that if you're the Park Hyatt, you're able to know that you're getting the best cucumbers on island on a regular basis. And then the third thing is that the grocery stores as well are trying to stock more local produce. They still have a lot of room for improvement, but because they've expanded their business so much with more visitors staying over for extended stays and more people coming to live here, that the grocery stores are very slowly starting to come around and purchase more goods from local farmers.
Thanks, Kian. Help us understand your farm business. Tell us about your operation and how it runs in detail.
Okay, so I just finished up with my farm, but basically the concept was it's a farm with multiple revenue streams. So we don't just grow one crop, we don't just focus on one animal. We have pigs, we would grow about 10 different types of crops at any given point. And then we also had a hydroponic system, which the hydroponic system also had a variety of crops that it was growing. And the reason being is that there's a select number of crops that do grow on the island, and there's so many farmers. So what can happen is one farmer can grow a lot of crops at one given point and flood the market. So if we grew all okra, for example, we could see our okra prices fall through the floor if another farmer on the island decided to grow even half his field with all okra. So what we did is we did about maybe 10 to 20% of our fields would be okra, or probably closer to 10%. And then another 10% would be a different crop type. And all the way up to fill all our field grown space. The hydroponics would be a similar thing. And then on top of that, we had livestock. So that was a completely different revenue stream that was coming in and really buffered any price different or fluctuations that might occur. And also, if our okra crop failed, we had other vegetables and livestock that could help fill in the gap there.
Okay. What are your largest challenges on the farm?
The three biggest challenges that we have are finding the right people. So that means people who know what they're doing, they understand agriculture, they know how to plant. The second thing is people who are reliable. They need to be people who are going to show up every day. They're going to show up on time, and they're going to put in good work from beginning of the day to end of the day. The second thing is sourcing the inputs we need. We're on an island, and anything we need, we have to have foresight about, and that means it's going to get shipped in. So we've got to think about a month, 2 months ahead minimum, and we've got to know the correct quantities that we need, because if it's something that we can't get on island or we have to ship in, we don't want to under order or be stuck with it, or even over order and see certain things, they might only have a limited shelf life. The third thing is establishing a product niche. So like I said, there's a lot of farmers here, because it's a small island, they can replicate what you're doing pretty easily. So you don't want to be like the guy who's just up the road. You want to have something that sets yourself apart, and that's really the biggest thing, because then you can talk to your restaurants or grocery stores, and you can establish yourself as someone who's unique, and they're going to keep calling you when they need that product.
So how have these challenges affected your farm in particular?
So I would say the biggest thing for our farm has been personnel, is finding the right people and then keeping them. In the beginning, we had a good crew, but then the team dynamics weren't good, and we lost a couple guys, and we found ourselves in a situation where we weren't able to get all the work done. Things fell into disrepair, and we really had to start from scratch again at a certain point, because we were left with one or two guys who were fairly knowledgeable but were disenfranchised by what we were trying to do. So at that point, it came down to going out and finding a whole new team of people who are going to be really good at what we were trying to do.
Great. So this question you've kind of addressed a little bit, but do you think the normal business model of farming is changing? And by business model, we mean the normal or traditional way your farm has done business and the type of markets that your farm operates in. Do you see those markets changing?
Yeah, so the markets are changing, and they're looking for direct access to farms and farmers. They want to be able to say and tell people that this is exactly where your produce is coming from. So I've seen in particular a couple farms who've gotten really good at this. It's a little bit of marketing, but it's also they provide an experience. One farm, an example, is Coconut Farm, which is down on the Southeast Peninsula. It's a local restaurateur who established this farm to service the needs of his restaurant and also provide other restaurants and his friends with great local produce. But it started to grow from there. So people started to hear about it, and they kept asking him, hey, how can I get some of your fresh farm eggs? How can I get your carrots, your herbs, whatever he might be growing? So he then established a Saturday morning farmer's market where he started selling his own goods, and that was a hit. And then the next thing he did is he started to collaborate with other local farmers. So as long as they weren't selling the same crops that he was growing, he invited them and encouraged them and asked them to come down on Saturday mornings and sell their goods alongside his. And everyone benefited from that. And it was a new approach, and it was collaborative, and it was a huge hit. Got one problem with my camera. There we go.
Thank you, Ken. That's very insightful. What are the differences between St. Kitts and other farms around the world? What makes your farm different from other locations of farms around the world?
Yeah, so our farms in St. Kitts, the biggest thing that you're going to see is they're smaller. We don't have 100-acre farms, which means that there's less mechanization as well. It's expensive to have big machinery. One, to buy it is expensive. For a small plot of land, the cost of capital is stiflingly high for most farms. And then to maintain that machinery gets really difficult. So it's kind of a which came first, the chicken or the egg, in that these farms are so small that they can't afford large machinery, but then at the same time, even if they could afford large machinery, it might not do a whole lot of great benefit. And so things are very done by manual labor and simple tools. And this means that there's a lot smaller yields, and you have to really find products that are going to fit a certain niche and run with those.
Great. If you could tell the public anything, what would it be?
I would say that St. Kitts is a place where agriculture is just trying to find its stride. And I think there's a lot of places where that's the case, where people are stuck in their conventional train of thoughts on how to grow things and what to grow and what the model is going to be. And we really need people who are willing to take on the task to step outside of the box and think differently and just jump into the problem. And it's a scary thing and it's a lot of risk, but it's a lot of reward, and you can learn a lot from it personally just as much as you can give back to the local farming community and to the local community who's reliant on the products that you'd be making.
Great. Where has technology made a difference on your farm?
Our farm doesn't really rely on too much high-tech stuff. A lot of our guys, they're not using anything much more technical than a hoe and a spade or a rototiller, or maybe even a weed whacker from time to time. But one area it has, and this isn't really high-tech, but we just started tracking a lot of data in Excel. And what that allowed us to do is we first started to just track what we were selling in market and then how much we were bringing back. So it showed us that we grew way too much eggplant, for example, and we were able to adjust the area in our field that was dedicated to eggplant and put a little bit more towards okra. But again, we don't want to push it too much and over leverage ourselves or become over reliant in a certain area. And so we put also a little bit more into the tomato plots and a little bit more into the carrot plots. And just by tracking our data, it started to give us immediate answers. And then the next thing we started to do, again, a simple tool, simple technology is Excel. We started to track what the yields were for the certain areas and what the inputs were. So if it was, we track how much water went onto those fields, and if we used fertilizer, how much fertilizer went onto those fields. So it really became a game of just writing down and absorbing as much data as we could and watching it and seeing what happened. And after a couple months, we would come up with an answer. And then once we'd realize what the next problem was or what the next big question we had was, we could run with that pretty simply.
Great. How have big corporations affected your day-to-day life? Like large agricultural companies, have they changed how you do business on your farm?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because we're in such a small market, you don't see the Monsantos and Cargills and John Deere's manufacturer, for example, operating in St. Kitts. It literally is too small for them to even turn their head towards. But relatively speaking, the big businesses here are the hotels and resorts and the grocery stores and restaurants. And especially the hotels and resorts and restaurants have become really receptive and really eager to buy from local farms. So if you go talk to a purchasing agent for one of these restaurants, they're going to tell you, if you have this product, I will take as much as I can from you and I'll buy from you versus shipping it in. That's their preference. Before, that wasn't always the case. They would choose the ease of knowing that they could get it from the grocery store over even having that initial conversation with the local farmer. Now